All right, so we're diving deep today into what it really means to, uh, really go deeper in your faith journey.
Yeah.
And we've got some really interesting excerpts here. One is from this Christian self-help book. It's called
Yeah.
"Grow into Jesus's Likeness,"
Mm-hmm.
and then we have this other short piece about
Nice.
what it really means to follow
And then
Jesus.
not just check all the boxes, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm a good Christian, I do all the things.
Right. It's about way more than that, right?
Totally. Yeah, I think one of the big questions that these sources kind of wrestle with, or at least bring up, is this idea, what does it really look like to move beyond just like saying, I believe, and actually step into a deeper, more committed relationship with Jesus?
Yeah. And reading through these, I mean, one of the first things that kind of jumped out at me
Okay.
was this idea that maybe just reading the Bible isn't enough.
Oh, that's one that can kind of make people a little bit nervous when they first hear it, I think. But the source is not like, ditch your Bible, burn all your Bibles. But it is getting at something a little bit deeper, I think. One of the things it talks about is this idea that society today, kind of the system we live in, pushes us towards being passive consumers. And that's kind of in direct conflict with what a life of faith is calling us towards, And it even says this, it says, quote, today's society wants us to become this kind of person because it means we keep buying and spending our money.
Mhm.
However, this is not the way to a meaningful life according to the Bible.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you think about it, like we're bombarded constantly with these messages to buy more, want more, be more comfortable, focus on yourself and your own needs. And then Jesus comes along and says, actually, it's about radical generosity. It's about pouring yourself out for others.
Yeah, it's almost like we're swimming upstream,
Yeah.
It's like the world's current is going in one direction,
Right.
and then our faith is calling us in the complete opposite direction, right?
Completely, yeah. And I think that tension is something we have to be really aware of because it's so easy to get swept up in that current
Yeah.
and not even realize it. You know what I mean? It affects everything.
Yeah.
How you spend your time, how you spend your money, the choices you make, your priorities, all of it.
Yeah. And it makes me think about another point that they bring up in here, this idea that you 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 can't make a difference without being different.
Okay.
It's like in order to really follow Jesus, we're almost guaranteed to kind of stand out
Yeah.
a little bit,
Yeah.
to go against the grain of maybe what everybody else is doing.
Right. And that can be a little bit uncomfortable, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Especially in a world where fitting in, being liked, being popular is so emphasized,
Right.
But what I think is interesting is the source connects that back to Jesus,
Yeah.
Like the source talks about how Jesus challenged the status quo, how he didn't shy away from truth even when it wasn't popular, and how he calls us to do the same, to exhibit qualities like grace over retaliation, generosity over hoarding.
Yeah, it's that process of change, right? It's that
Yeah,
inward,
it's that internal.
yeah, that inward transformation.
Totally. Like God wants to actually change us on the inside, not just,
Yeah.
make us act differently. And I think that transformation then affects everything, how we relate to people,
Yeah, totally.
how we, go about our day-to-day lives, everything.
And speaking of relationships, one of the things that really jumped out at me in one of these sources was this critique of what they call like the dog eat dog world, and how that mentality can even seep into our relationships.
Yeah.
Like it's easy to fall into that trap of seeing people as transactions.
Oh, yeah,
Like,
totally.
what can I get from this person? Or how can they help me get ahead?
Yeah. The source puts it this way, quote, we use people when we see them as tools to help us build a better life for ourselves. We use people when we scope out what relationships are advantageous for us to have. We use people when our relationship with people never extends beyond what can you do for me?
Yeah.
And I think that is like, it's kind of a punch in the gut in a
Yeah.
way, because it's like, is that how I view people sometimes? And I think that's the exact opposite of
Yeah.
what Jesus modeled for us. Like, think about the way Jesus healed people.
Right.
There was never this like, spreadsheet of
Yeah.
like, what am I going to get out of this?
Yeah.
It was purely motivated by love and compassion.
It's a huge contrast.
It is, yeah. And I think it makes you ask yourself the hard question. Are there ways that I'm subtly using people in my life, even if it's unintentional? And that's, I think, a big part of what it means to move from a shallow faith to a deeper faith. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's
Yeah.
about shifting that focus, I think.
Mhm.
It's like shifting that focus from what we can get
Totally.
to what we can give,
Absolutely.
and recognizing that there's value in every person, not just for what they can do for us, but just because they're a human being.
Exactly.
And that leads into this next point that I thought was really fascinating,
Okay.
which is this idea that our culture today, it's obsessed with career success, right?
Yeah.
And often overlooks the importance of character development.
Yeah.
And this source really kind of calls us out on that. One of the quotes in here says, if we were being real, the greatest pursuit in life for many of us is finding the career that makes us happy.
Right.
From a young age, we are groomed to find a job that is successful and makes a profitable income. And we spend years trying to define what that job is.
Mm.
It's like we're programmed to chase after this external validation, like my worth comes from my job title or my paycheck.
It's interesting, right? Like, and the source makes us think about, well, what really matters in the grand scheme of things. Like, I think it even says something like, quote, when people pass away, it is their character that is remembered and eulogized, not their material things or their income.
Yeah. It's powerful,
It's a
right?
powerful thought, yeah.
And it makes me wonder, like if you could choose just one character trait
Okay.
that you wanted to be known for,
Right.
what would it be?
Right.
Like what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind?
It's a good question. It's a question we all have to wrestle with, I think, because in the end, yeah, it's not about how much you made or what your title was.
Right.
It's about the kind of person you became. And I think that's where this idea of growing into the likeness of Jesus comes into play.
Totally, yeah.
It's about letting your faith
Yeah,
shape your character,
yeah. Cultivate
I-
those
it's-
virtues that reflect the heart of Christ.
And that character development,
Yeah.
that inward transformation.
That's what spills out
That's
into
right.
every area of our lives, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It affects our work, our relationships, our interactions with the world around us.
Totally.
It's about becoming those people who genuinely love and serve others.
Yeah. And what's fascinating to me is that the more we grow
Yeah.
into that likeness of Jesus,
Yeah.
the more our lives might actually start to look different
Yeah, totally.
from the world around us.
Yeah. And that can feel really unsettling, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, the source actually talks about how the path of Jesus might make our lives look a little different. Like we might end up valuing different things.
Yeah.
Not money and possessions, but character and making a difference in the world.
It's true.
And that differentness, it
Yeah.
can make us stand out, and not always in a good way.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
We might feel like we don't quite fit in.
Right.
Our values might not line up with kind of the mainstream.
Totally. And I think it's important to remember that Jesus,
Yeah.
he constantly challenged the norms of his day.
Right.
He didn't shy away from controversy. He didn't try to fit in with the in crowd. So if we find ourselves feeling out of place
Yeah.
or a little bit different, it might actually be a sign that we're on the right track.
I love that. It's like permission
Yeah,
to embrace that unfittingness,
totally.
to not feel like we have to conform.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's about aligning your heart with God's heart, even if it means
Yeah.
at standing out, going against the grain.
Yeah, totally. All this makes me think about something else the source brought up, which is this need for Christians to kind of balance truth with grace,
Okay.
especially in the way that we communicate our faith,
Right.
and even talk specifically about this tendency towards what it calls Bible beating and Christian outrage, especially online.
Yeah. I think that's a valid concern. And the source is saying, look, it's really easy to get caught up in trying to win arguments and prove a point and forget to show love and compassion.
Yeah. It's like our passion for truth can sometimes overshadow our call to love people well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the source specifically talks about this in the context of social media,
Right.
Let me see if I can find this quote here. It says, quote, with the explosion of social media, Christians can sometimes band together in a bout of moral outrage on certain topics, all conveyed in the form of statuses, link sharing, and/or tweet storms. On one hand, this appears to be a good thing, an avenue for the masses to be exposed to Christian truths. But what happens far too often is that in our communication of the truth, we forget to convey grace.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Ouch. Yeah.
Yeah, we can get so caught up in being right that we
Mhm.
forget to be loving.
Yeah. And wasn't that what Jesus was all about? I mean, he was full of truth,
Right.
but he also embodied love and grace in everything that he did.
He did. And the source goes on to say how we can kind of fall into this trap where, especially online,
Yeah.
we let our words do the talking, but maybe we're not backing it up with loving actions
Right.
in real life,
Right.
or we swing the opposite direction and we just do a bunch of nice things, but
Yeah.
we never actually talk about our faith.
Right.
And Jesus was this beautiful blend of both.
Yeah.
Like he preached powerful sermons, but he also healed the sick.
Yeah. And it wasn't just that he did it perfectly,
Right.
but he did it relationally. Like one of the things that jumped out at me is they talk about how Jesus, he never isolated himself to grow spiritually.
Right.
Instead, he surrounded himself with people, acknowledging that we, quote, are better together.
I love that.
Yeah.
And it's something I think we miss a lot.
Totally.
We think that, like, to grow deeper in our faith, we need to, like, withdraw from the world, be more solitary.
Right. Right.
But, even Jesus, the
Yeah.
Son of God.
Yeah. Recognize the importance of community.
Yeah.
He didn't try to go it alone.
It's encouraging, right?
It is. Yeah.
It takes the pressure off.
It does.
You don't have to be this like Lone Ranger Christian out there,
Totally.
Yeah.
And it shows us that growth happens best in the context of genuine,
Yeah.
authentic relationships.
Yeah. So community's not just like a nice bonus.
Right.
It's actually essential.
I think so. I think it's about recognizing that we need each other.
Yeah.
We need that sense of belonging, that shared experience of walking this path together.
Yeah, I love that. And it reminds me of that African proverb,
Yeah.
If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. And I think that really captures the essence of what it means to move
Yeah.
deeper in our faith, right? It's not a solo journey.
Yeah.
It's something we do alongside others.
Yes.
Supporting and encouraging each other along the way. Yeah.
For sure. And that leads me to another point from the source that I thought was really insightful.
Okay.
Which is, we don't have to wait for some extraordinary moment to start living out our faith more deeply.
Right.
It's not about
Right.
these grand gestures or heroic feats. It's about the everyday,
Yeah.
ordinary moments of our lives.
I love that. Yeah, and the source, it talks about this. It calls it living like Jesus. And it says, quote, most of our days are spent ordinary, and it's difficult to reconcile the ordinary with our extraordinary perspective of faith. Faith appears like this radical, bold action. Yet the reality is that living like Jesus is more ordinary than we think. So we can start right where we are.
Yeah.
In those mundane, routine parts of our lives.
Yeah, it's like instead of waiting for that big opportunity to shine for Jesus,
Right.
we can actually find him in the dishes.
Yeah.
In the carpool line, in those seemingly insignificant interactions throughout our day.
And the source encourages us. It's like, view those everyday roles.
Yeah.
Whether you're a parent, a friend, an employee, a student, whatever, view those roles as opportunities to honor God and to grow in your faith.
Yeah. The source even says, quote, living like Jesus means we acknowledge our roles and faithfully serve God in them. It means we pursue the excellence that comes with living for God's glory in these roles.
Yeah.
I love that. Like even in those everyday tasks,
Yeah.
pursue excellence.
Yeah. It's about doing everything with a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
Knowing that even the smallest acts can be acts of worship
Right.
when they're done with the right heart attitude.
It's not about compartmentalizing, right?
Yeah.
It's about integrating our beliefs with our behaviors.
Yeah.
Letting our faith influence how we parent, how we work,
Right.
how we interact with our neighbors, everything.
Totally. And that's where this whole idea of like bringing everything under the lordship of Christ
Right.
comes into play.
Right.
Yeah. It's like surrendering
Yeah.
every aspect of your life to him.
Yeah.
Letting his values and his priorities shape your own.
So instead of viewing those everyday roles as burdens or obligations,
Right.
we can see them as opportunities, right? Opportunities to grow in our faith
Yeah.
and to reflect Christ's character to the world.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. And the source reminds us that even Jesus, as the Son of God,
Right.
he found fulfillment
Right.
in doing the work that God gave him.
Yeah.
There's that verse in John 17:4 where Jesus is praying and he says, quote, I glorified you on earth, having accomplished the work you gave me to do.
Wow.
If Jesus found meaning and purpose in his everyday tasks, I think we can too.
Yeah, totally. It's a complete reframing
Yeah.
of how we view our lives, right?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
not about seeing these everyday things
Yeah.
as mundane
Yeah.
or insignificant. It's about seeing them as as opportunity to partner with God,
Absolutely.
to participate
Yeah.
in his work in the world.
It's about recognizing that God is present in those moments,
Yeah.
even the messy ones, and he can use them to shape us and to work through us.
It's funny. I remember reading a quote once that said, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans.
That's good.
Yeah.
That is good.
And then I think that really applies here too.
Mhm.
It's like we can make all these grand plans for how we're going to serve God, how we're
Yeah.
going to make a difference, but often it's in those unexpected
Yeah.
everyday
Yeah.
moments where he kind of shows
Yeah.
up and surprises us.
That's good. And I think it's a good reminder that moving from shallow faith to a deeper faith, it's not about a formula or a
Yeah.
set of rules, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
It's about surrendering to God's leading
Yeah.
in every area of your life
Right.
and trusting that he can use even the most ordinary moments to
Yeah.
accomplish extraordinary things.
And sometimes those extraordinary things
Right.
might look different than
Yeah.
we expect.
Right.
Remember how the source talked about
Yeah.
how growing closer to Jesus might actually make us less recognizable
Well,
in the world?
exactly.
Yeah.
It really challenges that notion that following Jesus is about like fitting in
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
being popular. In fact, it suggests that the more we grow in our faith,
Yeah.
the more we might actually find ourselves standing out,
Right.
going against the grain of what society values and prioritizes.
And that can feel really scary,
It can, yeah.
especially in a culture that puts so much emphasis on conformity
Yeah.
and success. But maybe that discomfort is actually a good sign.
Okay.
Maybe it means that we're actually starting to live differently, to think differently,
Yeah.
to see the world through a different lens.
I think so, yeah. And the source talks about how this differentness might show up in how we handle conflict. Okay.
Instead of retaliation, we choose grace.
Yeah.
Instead of hoarding our resources, we practice generosity.
Mm.
Instead of striving for everything, we're content with going without.
Yeah.
It's a countercultural way of living,
Right.
but it's the way of Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not always easy.
No, it's not.
I know I've struggled with this
Yeah.
in my own life. There are times when I've let fear or insecurity hold me back
Yeah.
from really living out my faith.
I think we all have those moments for
Yeah.
sure. But I think the beauty of it is that God meets us right where we are,
Yeah.
in the midst of our imperfections and our
Yeah.
struggles.
Yeah.
He's not looking for perfection.
Yeah.
He's looking for hearts that are truly surrendered to him.
That's encouraging, right?
It is, yeah.
It takes the pressure off.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's okay to mess up. It's okay to not have it all figured out.
Totally.
God is gracious and patient with us as we grow.
Yeah. So if you're feeling overwhelmed or
Yeah.
discouraged, don't give up.
Yeah. Keep seeking, keep growing,
Yeah.
keep leaning into that relationship with Jesus.
Yeah.
I think, at the end of the day, it's the most fulfilling adventure you'll ever embark on.
Totally.